Cool. So thanks all for joining. This is another Golang Tools call, and as a quick reminder, this is a bit of a open format call. We do follow an agenda and we have items to talk about, but there's always going to be a bit of open space at each section if anybody wants to bring up anything extra. So we are recording this call. If you don't want to be shown on the video, you can turn your camera off. And the first item is meta discussion. There's nothing on here unless anybody has anything. And if you do, please raise your hand or just speak. As far as IDE/editor/tools, I've got a couple of items here. The first one is an FYI. There might be an answer to that. There might be nothing in reply. But essentially, GoFumt, which is imported by GoPlease, now vendors its own version of GoPrinter. And the reason was because some people were building the tool with different Go versions, and they were telling me, hey, the behavior is inconsistent. And yeah, I mean, that's how GoPrinter behaves, right? Each version gets changes. And that's not a problem for GoFumt because it ships with Go, but then my tool is separate. So my fix is to vendor GoPrinter. I forked it essentially. And for the binary itself is not a problem because I'm just swapping one library with another. But for GoPlease, it is ending up with two versions of the same library.
If the reason for vendoring it is because the behavior of GoPrinter is changing, would it make sense to add like a language version to the printer.config struct or something like that?
I thought about that, but suggesting that means that somebody will actually do it. And I think it's going to be quite a bit of work to maintain all the past formatting styles. I don't know what to call them, right? Because some changes are like tweaking a heuristic. So are you going to maintain all versions of all heuristics? And some changes are bigger. Like, for example, I remember Robert changed the way comments are vertically aligned. So you'd have to maintain like another 100 lines of historical code if you did that.
That may be true, but it's not clear to me that that's that big of an overhead or that it's not worth doing. I don't know. I mean, you've also got overhead from vendoring GoPrinter, right? And so I don't know. I think it's at least worth considering. I'm not. It's not obvious to me what the outcome of that consideration would be.
I think it would be worth looking at the exact differences that caused you to make this decision, Daniel. So, and I know that there have been changes. I'm struggling to recall exactly what they were, but I do have the sense that some of them were considered bug fixes. And so I'm not sure we would want to maintain bug compatibility with older versions of GoPrinter.
Would one of the changes have been the changes to formatting comments? Because that was a pretty major one recently.
I believe that's the main one that was reported. I guess that's an easy one because you can turn it off, but many others in the past have not been that way.
So sorry, remind me, there is a way to disable the 119 doc comments?
Sorry, there isn't a way. I'm not sure actually, but what I meant is that if we wanted to do what Brian meant, what Brian mentioned, in this case, it would be easy. It's just a Boolean check, right? But in other cases, like tweaked heuristics, you would have to copy the heuristic, maintain old and new versions.
It occurs to me that this ties in pretty strongly into the extended compatibility proposals that Russ has filed. I will link those in the meeting notes.
Yeah, the only other thing that comes to mind is that your mention of overhead. I guess I'm fine with library vendoring overhead because it's like a +1 thing. It's not +n, and it doesn't increase over time. Whereas maintaining old printers does increase over time, assuming that GoFumt will keep changing, right? So in my mind, this is easier, but I'm not sure.
I think in a sense this shows up the limitations of the extended compatibility proposal because, this thing, some module might be, say it's Go 115 and expect Go 115 semantics and be calling out to some external thing which does a go.printer, and that has in some other module, but the behavior is still going to change, right? So fundamentally some of those compatibility things cannot be preserved, I think, because we all live in one shared module space.
Okay, I'll think about making a proposal, even though I think I lean against a language setting in GoPrinter. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I 100% agree with your assessment that it might be a reasonable idea in the abstract, but I balk at implementing or maintaining it going into the future. And what you're doing now seems perfectly fine. I don't think GoPrinter is a very large library, and I'm not concerned about the additional binary size.
For what it's worth, in maintaining the sort of similar formatting personalities in GoMod Tidy, we haven't found it to be a huge burden to keep compatibility, although we also haven't kept perfect compatibility, right? We've tried to maintain consistency where it's not fixing a bug, and where it is fixing a bug, we've at least tried to maintain stability where the old version preserves the changes made by the new version, but not necessarily the opposite. Yes, mod files are simpler than Go source files. That is also true. So
I think the tricky bit is, sorry, go ahead. I realize I'm not raising my hand. I think the tricky bit is what Rob said, which is that I also want bug compatibility with old bugs, even though that's maybe not what the maintainer of GoPrinter wants, but a person wants a tool to be deterministic, right? They install a version, it needs to behave exactly in one way. So if CI formats in a buggy way, they need to format in the same buggy way. So that's kind of what I'm going for.
Just as an amusing aside, I recently discovered that about the Go modules thing. I was running some of the examples from the lazy module loading proposal, and I was like, those examples don't work anymore, and that's because they say Go 115 in the Go mod files in those examples, and of course the behavior is the same in 115. So if you change that to Go 119, it works. Cool, it works. Hooray!
Okay, the next one is also mine. I'm resurrecting. Oh, yeah, that is the right link. I'm resurrecting a topic we talked about, I believe, over a year ago, which is a flag in GoFumt to use the exit status code for whether or not any changes would be made. And that is primarily for the flags D and L, which are used in CI quite often, not for modifying files on disk so much. I tried to summarize what I believe is the current status of the discussion in the last comment or two. Essentially, for some time we said, let's wait to see what GoMod Tidy does with its check flag. But I believe that proposal has been decided towards, let's just make the diff, let's add a diff flag that shows a diff and uses the exit code. But presumably we don't want to do that for GoFumt, because GoFumt has a diff flag that doesn't use exit status codes, and that could be a breaking change. And there's also people that want to use this exit code stuff with the L flag. So my proposal is to add a new flag that just uses exit codes. And I found git diff that has an --exit code flag. So I think we could piggyback off of that and have one called -exit code, for example, or -exit. That is my proposal to get this unstuck. But perfectly fine. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'll jump in without much context and ask the naive question: can't you just do this by consuming the output?
You can
write a wrapper.
You can in some shells, but it gets tricky when we talk about CI and portability, because, for example, in CI, if I write something that captures the output and matches it with something, that's going to work on Linux, but not on Windows, right? And this is actually the same reason why we want. It's a similar reason as to why we want it in Go mod tidy, because you could do Go mod tidy, write change to the disk, and then look at the changes. But usually you need something like Git for that. So you need like extra machinery back and forth, which is a bit annoying. So one command that just tells you is easy.
I mean, one possibility might be a flag that just says, a -check flag, rather than -exit applying to some other. That would maybe be more direct. I don't know, just random thought.
I'm not at all bothered by the name of the flag. If the issue is the name of the flag, I will defer to somebody to name it, and then I'll happily implement it.
Suppose the question is whether it's exclusive to -d, or whether you want it to print what you print on if the check fails, I suppose.
I think we could make it only work with DNL, which is what people are asking for. And if people want it for more scenarios in the future, we can always lift the restriction. That seems conservative.
Yeah, you could make it so it worked on its own as well. So it just gets the status, which is potentially useful.
Oh, yeah, true. Okay, I'll make a quick comment on the issue. Okay, I might send a CL soon just to get this unstuck. I mean, the implementation is going to be pretty simple. So on to command go. There's nothing on the agenda. And actually, for this section, anything else that people want to add? Cool, command go.
Let's see. If nobody has any particular things, I'll just fill in for the upcoming release cycle for 121. Right now I'm chasing a graph pruning bug that seems to be pretty substantial, and I'm going to fix it and try to backport it as soon as I can wrap my head around what the solution is. I'm also planning to look at private repo authentication issues that folks have reported in various venues. So if you have any particular scenarios where you can reproduce UX problems with private repos, please let me know, because I'd like to test that they're fixed in 121.
When you say graph printing, presumably you're talking about module graph?
Module graph pruning, yeah.
Okay, cool, yeah.
Specifically, GoGet has a bug where it's not pruning the graphs in some cases where it needs to be, and that's triggering a panic. So, yeah, it's a pretty bad bug, but also a pretty gnarly solution.
Okay. On anything else for command go?
There will probably be a few more proposals for the Go command in the 121 cycle. So if you're interested in how the Go command behaves, keep a look at the proposal notes.
I imagine that you mean the rolling thread with the proposal review meeting minutes, right? So that is this thread, in case anybody doesn't know about it. Okay, on to miscellaneous. I have one here about the playground, which is essentially that the playground has supported examples with dependencies and a Go mod file for some time, but if you add any non-trivial dependency, it sort of times out easily within what seems to be like 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds or so. I'm guessing it's because it's downloading and building dependencies from scratch, so it's quite easy to run into that limit. but that is just a guess. And the other part of the problem is that the output just tell me it's downloading dependencies, but it's hard to tell whether or not it started building or if it was still downloading, because Go build by default doesn't really tell you the progress of the build. So yeah, if anybody knows more about the playground, please chime in.
It'd be great to be able to run slightly more substantial examples in the playground.
Yes, definitely.
Like, we can't run anything with Q in it, basically. It's like, oh, damn it. I can't demonstrate anything about that in the playground.
I think, as Brian pointed out in the notes, we have a little bit of recent context on this because we discovered that the TIP playground was failing health checks, and so failing to deploy, and had been stale since October. And the reason for that is that Std archives were no longer stored in Go root, and so Std was being rebuilt on the Hello World application that are used for health checks. So a related issue that we solved by modifying our deploy script to copy in a shared Go cache for each build that just contains the Std archive files. All I can add, so yeah, that doesn't help us here, but I will add that the current deployment is not very beefy. And we were, one of the solutions to this problem that we considered was just letting all builds share a Go cache and having some other process that cleans it up occasionally. And the concern with that was just that the shape of our App Engine tasks is so small that would probably be difficult to meaningfully implement. We'd have to have a really aggressive garbage collection cycle, or it wouldn't be very useful, or both. So all this to say, I'm not sure that this is an easily solvable problem unless someone has ideas that I haven't thought of.
I was also thinking that it's probably not super easy to solve, because even if you add perfect caching, if the cache is empty, how are you going to fill it if the timeouts are low, right? So I think any solution has to be a hybrid of multiple approaches. Probably something around the lines of, if it's not in the cache, give it more timeout, or maybe slightly more powerful CPUs or a better connection to a proxy, something like that.
My thought in the past has been, well, if it times out for me this time, well, maybe there's something triggered in the background that, after a little bit, like I try again and it will have filled, so it basically triggers something out of band that fills the cache. I don't know if that's viable or not, or whether that's even a silly idea, but that's kind of what I might have expected in the past. Like, oh yeah, it's run, and now, yeah, a bit later it kind of works because it's done it, rather than having a synchronous thing that might wait for a minute. That totally assumes a shared cache, though, of course.
I just think I think we probably would accept contributions for this, but we don't have a lot of resources to work on the playground right now, and I think it would be a rather involved engineering solution. Unfortunately, any solution would have to both be in the code and in the infrastructure, which only the Go team manages. So if someone were interested in contributing a fix to this, they'd have to find a Go team member to work with to make those contributions. So unfortunately, it does not seem like this problem is likely to be solved soon.
I have one follow-up question about this, which is, right now when I run Go build, it's hard to tell what the progress is, which is fine by default, and there's a verbose flag to tell me what packages I believe it's finished building or has started building. I can't remember. But it could be nice to have something like a JSON log flag, kind of like Go test, that tells you what it's doing. Because, for example, for the playground, it would be useful to tell, am I timing out because I'm spending 90% of the 10 seconds on CPU time, or is it because I'm downloading stuff? Right, that sort of thing would be useful, I think.
There's a little bit of tension between useful output and deterministic output, because we do kind of want to, on the one hand, we want to, if something is stuck, we want to show you what's stuck. On the other hand, like if someone is parsing the output or verifying the output or something like that, we don't want to occasionally throw in things that they aren't expecting that are not readily reproducible. That's not to say that we can't make improvements, but that we have to be careful about balancing those two interests between useful insight and reproducibility.
I guess what I was asking was more like a trace, actually, more than a log. I think there was tracing added at some point, wasn't there?
Yes, there is a tracing flag. It's still somewhat experimental, but it does exist.
Then my point is moot, I think, because that's pretty much what I was wanting. Cool. There's nothing else in miscellaneous, so the next section is what are people working on going forward? And I see somebody added the first item, so go ahead.
Sure. So hi, everyone. So I've been working on a taint analysis package for Go. So it's something that works with the Go analysis kind of suite of packages or inspired by them. Specifically, it builds on top of the SSA packages, and it inspects the SSA value graph for whatever given source types that reach any given sink types. So a very classic kind of hello world example of taint analysis is identifying SQL injection in programs. So you can identify whether a field from a HTTP request struct reached a database SQL query function. And then you can once you have like that full flow, you don't actually have SQL injection. You need to like then identify if you're using like a prepared statement. But anyway, like the point of the taint analysis package is to be able to identify Go program or identify potentially insecure or just flows of data through Go programs. I know there's been some prior work by Praetorian for GoCart, by Google with GoFlow Levy, amongst a few other things. But the kind of like main goal, at least for this package, has been to try to be as small as possible to make the like actual call graph, the actual taint analysis algorithm is fairly simple to understand as possible. It's effectively implemented in 3 internal functions that inspect a given call graph. So I'm looking for feedback, any sort of general kind of anything. I kind of just putting it out here and looking for any interest, or maybe you know someone that would be interested. Please feel free to share or anything like that.
To be clear, this is static analysis.
Correct. Yeah, this is statically doing the taint analysis.
A bit of a coincidence, but just yesterday somebody was asking me if there's any good examples for using Go SSA to track values and types. So I just sent them your link.
Awesome. And that's like totally like the point of it is like, I think there's a fair lack of SSA examples of how to use the package. And this is like, I went through the dragons to understand how it works and trying to show it by bringing up an example. My goal is to build other examples outside of just the SQL injection analyzer that I have as a demo. But that's the hello world. So I wanted to start there. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, feel free to make GitHub issues as well. And I'll definitely check out the static analysis on Gopher Slack. Thank you very much for that recommendation.
Just want to say, it sounds really exciting. And so Alan's not on the call today, but he and Tim King have been working a lot with SSA package recently to update it for generics. And so I think there's a small but interested group community of people who are interested in developing that package more. So if you have insights from your experience, they would be interested in hearing that.
Yeah, that's definitely. I've been meaning to reach out to Alan Donovan because I see his to-dos all over that SSA package. So it's like, oh, you might have insight. But yeah, thank you for the recommendation.
Okay, the next item is mine. It's just an FYI that I've started using a tool called Go Measure, written by somebody who I believe is on Slack. And it's one of those tools that tells you when your dependencies have a new major version that you might not have noticed, and then it allows you to make that update automatically. Because it's not just a go get, right? You also have to update your import statements. So I'm really happy with it. So I thought I would share in case others find it useful as well.
So to be clear, this isn't about upgrading your package to a major version. This is updating some dependency to a new major version. Does it tell you when you've broken your API?
I'm not sure if you can use it for your own module. I'm using it to update my dependencies.
Yeah.
So one of its modes is look at all my dependencies, tell me if any of them has a major update that's stable, right? And I actually hadn't noticed 3 of them across my projects, just because by default, if I go get updates, I don't see them, right?
Yeah, does it tell you when you're like, because of course you can have, if you're importing a different major version, that's actually a breaking change if you export some of those dependencies in your API. Does it warn you about that?
I don't think it does anything about API compatibility. It probably could.
Yeah.
But the way I've been using it is update and then see what happens, right? Run my tests.
Yeah, it'll update the tests too, though, so that probably wouldn't break the tests.
Oh, are you saying if the update would break my APIs?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, at least for my flow, I would catch that at the time I do my releases, right? But I don't know what other people do.
Right, yeah, because you do a Go release, a Go release compatibility check. Cool.
The next one is ROPS, I believe.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this in the past, but I just wanted to give a heads up that we're making big changes in GoPlease, primarily Alan and myself, but several other people on the team as well. And to characterize these changes very generally, we're moving towards using export data rather than holding types in memory. Right now, that shouldn't make a big difference, but eventually it will allow us to write a lot of information to disk and solve GoPlease's fundamental memory problems that have plagued it since inception. So the reason I'm mentioning this is to get people a little excited, I hope, but also to point out that master is particularly unstable right now. We just discovered yesterday that there's a new crasher in export data, because I think this is the first time that export data has significantly been used on packages with type errors. So there may be some invariants that are violated by either the exporter or by Go types. And so we'll just have to pay that price. But yeah, I'm excited about the work, and we're making good progress. So for more things on the horizon. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking to myself, how would you save memory? Because supposedly if you're editing the current package, Go types does need all the transitive dependencies to be in memory, right? With the type information?
Sure. So if I'm editing, well, right now, to be clear, GoPlease has the entire workspace in memory type checked, including often all intermediate test variants, which can magnify memory usage many times depending on the layout of your module. So GoPlease currently holds absolutely everything you could ever possibly need in memory. And so there are lots of improvements that one can make to that. So yes, it does have to hold the forward closure of any open files in memory in order to have low latency responsiveness to inquiries on those files. but that's actually not much. I mean, direct importers can be imported from export data, which will be a lot less information than we currently hold. And then furthermore, we're rewriting all of the workspace-wide queries to use on-disk indexes instead of like naive traversals of the type graph. So where instead of when you ask for, say, references to a particular object, what the current algorithm does is it finds all the objects that are referenced at the cursor. And there could be many because of all these intermediate test variants, et cetera. And then it looks at the entire reverse cone of the package and walks all of the objects in that reverse cone to find which of them are uses of the reference at the cursor, of the object at the cursor. So it's a really simple algorithm, but it only works if you have everything in memory. And we're changing the model to instead compute all of the uses edges after we type check each package, write them to disk, and then load them from disk and query them from disk as we need them. So this allows us to stop holding the entire workspace in memory. It will eventually allow us to do that. So in other words, memory should be proportional to the set of open files, not to the size of your workspace.
Yeah, I think when people say Go Please is resource hungry, they probably mean this problem. Like you
Yeah,
open
it's
a
almost always memory. Yeah.
No, but I mean in particular, opening a somewhat small package within a large workspace and then seeing the memory jump to 10 gigabytes and then not understanding why.
Yeah. I mean, as an aside, another thing we're working on is solving that problem. Like you shouldn't have to know which directory you opened in order to be able to use VS Code and Go Please effectively. You shouldn't have to think about that problem. And so one of the reasons why you have to think about that currently is because of memory constraints. Another reason is because of the way we compute the set of build routes. And we'd like to solve both of those problems.
Okay. Well, I run master, so if it crashes, I'll let you know.
Please do.
Hasn't done that so far, I think. So I believe Hannah has the last item.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to send a reminder that there is a tool called GoVulCheck, and also recently, like Go Please and VS Code Go actually integrated GoVulCheck and also Go Please version of vulnerability check analyzer. So yeah, it would be nice if we hear more feedback on GoVulCheck and also Go Please VS Code Go integration of it. And also thank you, Daniel Marty and other contributors giving us the early feedback on the GoVulCheck. And I heard Alan Donovan and the security team actually made some improvement in the performance too. So yeah, if you didn't, build again and then try to run and then give us more feedback. And also another thing is Kent Gruber's taint analyzer. I think it is similar to GoVulCheck in the sense that GoVulCheck also uses SSA analysis and then try to construct a call graph. So yeah, there is some commonality that we can actually share and exchange information about. Yeah. So. Cool.
I've got a question about what you mentioned about the Go Please integration. So what will the difference be between running the tool directly and through Go Please?
So there are two different types of vulnerability check Go Please currently supports. One is just purely based on the import. If a package is imported in the transitive dependency graph, then it reports. That is pretty fast. And another integration is basically Go Please has the snapshot of GoVulCheck, and then it runs. Basically, it's similar to GoVulCheck. It should be same as GoVulCheck, but it actually translates the finding to LSP the diagnostics. So you can see from the editor. So the reason that we have two different analyses is probably Kent also knows but sometimes this core graph analysis is really expensive, and it currently doesn't actually fit in the Go analysis framework well. So we decided, we wish we could run Google check type of analysis all the time in real time, but we found that it is a little bit challenging. So that's actually one of the motivating the reason that like Alan and team are working on the SSA, and then somehow they try to figure out how this SSA analysis and core graph analysis can fit well in the Go analysis framework. Anyway, so as an interim solution, another one is maybe I may be interested in just finding all the vulnerability that in the package that I depend on, even before I actually hit this vulnerability. So there is another demand. So we offer both now.
I think my bit of feedback there would be if there's multiple modes to run the tool and they're going to stick around for a little while, I would document them, because I was looking at the Go doc for Govul and Chang right now, and I see some flags, but I don't really see anything about modes or like running within Go Please. So I would be confused by those differences, I think.
So Go Please basically imports Govul check. So there is experimental API basically that actually uses the Govul check internal, and it I think the currently Govul check allows only the core graph analysis, and there are only two knobs. One is including the test files, or another but in the Go Please we just Go Please integration, we ignore test flag. And we dropped, I think, in the early version of Go, which we had the import flag that analyzes imports. But I think at some currently we are not supporting this.
Okay, sounds good. If you want to reach more people, I would suggest to use the other two channels we have, which is the mailing list and the tools channel. And you could probably also do the static analysis channel, because this is static analysis.
Yeah.
You can probably just reuse the same message. You're going to reach more people.
Yeah. True.
Okay. Any other items or topics before we finish? Okay, so on to the next call. We're doing roughly every 6 weeks. So 6 weeks from now, keeping the same day and hour, would be February 22nd. So again, that would be at 4 p.m. UTC, London time. Does anybody disagree with that? Is it like a public holiday somewhere or any other event? Does that mean that he'll come, or that we should delay by 1 week?
I'm just checking. It's totally fine. Works for
Okay.
me.
Okay, but if it isn't, let us know, because I'm sure the next week would also be fine. Okay, so let's do that then, and I'm happy to run it again. So I'll get that done. And if Robert, if you can help me with the recording, then I'll upload it as well. Cool. So thanks everybody, and see you in 6 weeks.